Hi, everybody. So I know I'm in the dark. Sorry about that. I am just doing a little bit more research, and I wanted to go further into Ezekiel chapter 44 and 45 specifically to look at some details that I wanted to present really quickly. So in talking about the brackets of the 70th week, the beginning and ending point, same day, 7 years apart, and then the midpoint of the week, and talking about Daniel 9:27. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. I wanted to just kind of give a little bit more information about where you can kind of read about those things specifically in the book of Ezekiel. Again, chapters 44 and 45. In the 70 weeks prophecy, he's referred to the Antichrist, referred to as the prince of the people that shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. And that part he's referred to as the prince. In the last video that I went through, I was talking about how Israel must believe herself to be in the kingdom age in order for the things in the tribulation to even take place. If things don't line up a certain way, Israel's not going to buy into the narrative that this person is selling them. How do we know what they're supposed to accept? How do they know what they're supposed to accept? How do they know how things are going to be so that they have something to mirror it or match it up with? Well, that's what Ezekiel 40 through 48 is all about. Specifically talking about the sacrificial system is kind of where I wanted to head with this video, because that is what the beginning of the week and the midpoint of the week are predicated upon, the sacrificial system. To confirm a covenant is to dedicate it with blood. We get this from Hebrews 9, that neither testament, old or new, was dedicated without blood. The old covenant in Exodus 24 was dedicated with the blood of bulls and goats. And I'll actually just read that. Forgot I had my Bible down here still. I'm going to kind of just preface this, and I don't want to be here real long, but I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little more food for thought if it's not something that you were familiar with. So in Hebrews 9, it says, verse 16, for where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. For a testament is of force after men are dead, otherwise it is of no strength at all while the testator liveth. And we know that from current last wills and testaments is there, after someone dies, then the wills and everything are gone through and the estates are dispersed and things like that. But not until there's a death does that occur. So it says, whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood. So we know the new covenant was dedicated with the shed blood of Jesus Christ on the cross, his death. And that is how the new covenant came in, was Jesus' shed blood on the cross and his death on the cross. Well, in Exodus 24, and I'm actually not going to read it, but it is in Exodus 24, the first few verses of the chapter. For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people, he took the blood of calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book and all the people, saying, this is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you. So when you go to Exodus 24, you see that the old covenant was dedicated with the death and shed blood of animals. And in the new covenant, you see that it was dedicated with the death and shed blood of Christ on the cross. When we're talking about the 70th week, we're talking about a reinstitution of the old covenant, of the Mosaic law with all the Mosaic statutes, and a confirmation that requires death and shed blood of animals. This will coincide with the Passover. Now, hang on with me for just a second, because this also ties into the Daniel 70th week prophecy. Confirming a covenant requires death and shed blood. We're just going to get that off the table right now and say that is in the First Testament, in the Old Covenant, and in the New Covenant. That is how they were both dedicated. So to confirm it, to make it strong, requires those two things, death and shed blood. That is how the Daniel 70th week covenant will begin, is with the death and shed blood of animals to reinstitute the Mosaic law, which requires the temple and the reinstitution of the sacrificial system and a return to all of the statutes. That is what that is. And the reason that God despises it is because it is a rejection of Jesus's death on the cross. And it is a rejection of his final sacrifice for sin. Now, my question was, okay, we get that he's going to confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. But how can he actually cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease? How can one person cause that to stop? I mean, there's some kind of action that must be taken on his place, or to cause it to stop would be a lack of action, a lack of performing these required sacrifices and offerings. This is where we get to Ezekiel 44 and 45. Specifically, in Ezekiel 44, it talks about the reinstitution of the priesthood that will occur, and the sacrifices and the guarding of the house and everything that they will be required to do. The Levitical priesthood and the priests and the offerings that they will make and things like that. That is Ezekiel 44. In Ezekiel 45, it actually talks about oblations. So you have Ezekiel 44 talking about sacrifices and Ezekiel 45 talking about oblation. He's going to cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. How can he do that? He would need to be responsible for giving those or doing those or performing those in order to cause them to cease by simply not performing them any longer. This is where we understand that he will be the one confirming the covenant. He will be the one doing the sacrifice at the beginning with Israel to confirm this, to make this strong. Ezekiel 45 backs this up. He is the one that will be not doing what he should do in order to perform sacrifices to keep them continuing on a specific day, which therefore kind of breaks it, I guess. What people say breaks the covenant. It's just a lack of continuing the process, pretty much. Ezekiel 45 has this verse that tells us exactly why he will be the one doing these sacrifices to confirm this, and why he will be the one ceasing to do these sacrifices to cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease at the midpoint of the week. Ezekiel 45:17. And again, this goes back to Daniel 9:26, where he is identified as the prince. I'm going to read that verse real quick because the term prince comes into play here. That is a role that this guy will play in the first half of the 70th week. So Daniel 9:26, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. That's after the first 69 weeks of years, Jesus goes to the cross, dies for the sins of the world. Then it says, and this is a reference to 70 AD, but it says, and the people of the prince that shall come. So there's a prince that's going to come, and it is he who confirms the covenant with many for 1 week. This is where we get to the role of the prince in Ezekiel 45. And this is how he can both confirm at the beginning of the week and cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease in the midpoint of the week. And it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings and meat offerings and drink offerings in the feasts, Passover to begin the week, and tabernacles in the midst of the week, to cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. So again, I'm going to read that again. And it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings and meat offerings and drink offerings in the feasts and in the new moons and in the Sabbaths and the solemnities of the house of Israel. He shall prepare the sin offering, because without the shedding of blood is no remission. The whole reason for confirming the covenant, the sin offering to get rid of the sins of Israel. It's the whole reason for that. He shall prepare the sin offering and the meat offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings to make reconciliation for the house of Israel. That is the whole purpose of confirming the covenant, and why we know it's predicated upon a return to the Mosaic law the sacrificial system, the reinstitution of all of that stuff, and ultimately the priesthood and the rebuilding of the temple. It is the job of the prince, who he is identified as in Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy, to give those offerings and on specific days for the reconciliation for the house of Israel. Just some things to think about, but again, the time period and the goings on and the things that will be happening and why Israel will think herself to be in a time where she's not, all goes to Ezekiel 40 gotten through 45. So there's all parts. The rebuilding of the temple is in chapters 40 through 42. The why they're going to do it is in chapter 43. The understanding the prince and his job toward Israel in chapters 44 and 45. The priesthood, chapter 44, talking about the sacrifices, the oblation specifically in chapter 45, and the job that the prince has specifically to make reconciliation for the house of Israel, which again goes to covenant confirmation to start the week. And then obviously to the midpoint of the week, which coincides with a feast upon which he is the one offering sacrifices on those days. Actually, both the beginning and the midpoint of the week go to feast days. So just some interesting things. And I think I'm definitely going to be writing a book about this, because the more I study this, the more it's just like popping out at me. And I want to make sure that I do this justice and present the information to everyone that might be interested in it also. So any questions, comments, or feedback, let me know. But specifically, beginning and midpoint of the week, as it relates to Daniel 9:27a and b, can be found explained by Ezekiel 45:17. Have a good night, everybody.